Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world and whenever you are watching this. Welcome back to the Peanut Gallery. Today we are going over again the foiled drone attack at Leipzig airport. Yesterday, August 25th, there was significant developments in the investigation. Just a quick recap. On the 4th of August 2026, a highly coordinated multi-drone kinetic sabotage operation targeted Leipzig airport. Leipzig is a major European air freight hub and a critical NATO logistics gateway, and also is home to the Ukrainian Antonov fleet. So what basically happened on the 4th of August, a first-person view drone was found connected to 800 grams of semtex near the Ukrainian Antonov fleet. It failed in its detonation due to a ripped detonator. On that same night, when the airport was shut down, a DHL cargo plane was coming in and had to abort takeoff and land elsewhere. During that time, it was struck by a second drone. This second drone, it was believed to be there to film what was going on. Like I said in the last video, if this attack had succeeded, there would have been no best case scenario. It would have been mass destruction, mass casualty event, because the planes that the drone was found next to reportedly had ammunition on board that was bound for Ukraine, although German parliament later denied this, even though it was in a police report, so go figure. So yesterday, the 25th of August, the investigation has released some more news, which is very significant. You remember in the last video, I said potential perpetrators could have been a hobbyist drone operator with a bit of an anarchist streak, Russian influenced and Russian backed, or potentially a false flag operation, potentially by Ukraine or another third party state. We'll get into this more because there has been some quite significant twists in the investigation. So again, 25th of August, yesterday, it was revealed that a third drone was found in... It was found in an open field in Kabul Sketel. I'm sorry for any German listeners for my probably duff pronunciation, but that's how I'm reading it. This was west of the runway. So, again, another twist with that one. So, just to outline the chronology of drone recoveries, on the 4th of August, the first drone was found, which had 800 grams of semtex. This was on the south runway near the Ukrainian Antonov fleet, and it failed its detonation due to a ripped detonator. Again, the same night, as I mentioned, there was a second drone that collided midair with a departing DHL cargo plane. This DHL cargo plane was also reported to be carrying unspecified dangerous goods. On the 11th of August, so you might be thinking 11th of August, 25th, we'll get into that in a second, there was an isolated drone motor and rotor blade found in the airport perimeter grounds. This is likely being discarded or lost during deployment. The 14th of August, they found the third first-person view drone in an open field in Kabul Sketel, west of the runways, and it was investigated and found to be defective and probably grounded premature due to hardware failure. The there was also something else found with that drone, which I will go into. So, as we know, the first drone had 800 grams of semtex and a professional detonator. That massive semtex next to an Antonov plane that was fueled and loaded with ammunition would have caused an absolutely catastrophic explosion. Wherever that Antonov was parked, that part of the airport would then probably cease to exist. The ammunition that was on board, it hasn't been verified what was on board or how much was on board, but given the Antonov's absolutely cavernous interior and ability to carry over 100,000 kilos of cargo, it's certainly not going to be just a few hundred or a few thousand kilos. The explosives would have destroyed the plane, and the resultant fires would have caused a cook-off, so the ammunition wouldn't have all exploded at once. Once a fire was going, you'd have your primary explosion from the semtex and ammunition that it'd blow up, and then the fire would cause any other ammunition to cook off, so it would have hindered firefighting operations massively. You'd have had shrapnel, you'd have had debris blown over a wide area. Not a good outcome, but I digress. So the third drone that was found in Cabo Skettle, it was found after recovering the third drone. They uncovered a secondary payload consisting of approximately 50 grams of hexagen, or RDX as it's known, a highly stable, dense military-grade crystalline explosive that is significantly more powerful than TNT. So when you've got semtex and hexagen, that pretty much wipes out the theory that it was a hobbyist drone operator with a bit of an anarchist streak, which leaves either Russian-backed proxies or a false flag operation. The airframes were not standard consumer drones. They were heavily modified to systematically defeat airport security screens. So we had dual SIM cards in the drones, which allowed the operators to master control signals, and 5G antennas. So that routes the pilot commands through standard commercial mobile data networks, rendering localized airport radio frequency anti-drone sensors useless. So, the German investigators have identified two main staging and command areas situated directly outside the airport fencing. The lack of direct line of sight requirements due to 5G networks allowed the cells to operate from heavy cover. So on the first site, this was at Kersdorf, in a wooded area in Kersdorf. The investigating officers located a makeshift command and signal amplification system rigged inside of a tree canopy. So the rigging, it was found that external telecommunications antenna and electronic control modules were found taped to a branch. Meters away from this site, police found a burnt patch of earth and charred metal fragment. You might be thinking, well, what's this got to do with it? It matches eyewitness statements of a loud detonation at 7:20 p.m. on the night of August the 4th. This suggests that the perpetrators executed a remote or timed self-destruction of their launch equipment to wipe forensic traces. Site B, the Cabo Skettle Fields, which is west of the runways. It's a sprawling open municipality bordering the western runway boundaries. That was the site that yielded the defective third drone and the loose 50-gram hexagen packet, marking it as a secondary vector or abort zone used by the cell. So, we're at the point where it can be the hobbyist with an anarchist streak is effectively wiped out. The explosives found weren't some hodgepodge homemade portion that was made up. We're talking hardcore military grade explosives, and even if you're some John Doe with a chip on your shoulder, you're going to need serious connections to get hold of that much semtex and hexagen. Getting hold of that, while it's technically not impossible, you're at pretty high risk of getting caught unless you've got some seriously good connections. So that leaves us with Russian involvement or false flag. The interesting point that really raises an eyebrow, on the 25th, yesterday, Frederick Merz announced that federal investigators possess airtight circumstantial and forensic evidence regarding the highly professional drone attacks. Germany is preparing to issue a formal attribution statement imminently, but as of recording, that hasn't materialised. But he has warned that the perpetrators will pay a price. What that price will be is anyone's guess. The breakthrough that the Federal Criminal Police Office and European forensic teams has established a definitive, viable DNA link between the August 26 drone components and a dismantled cell currently on trial in Lithuania for the 2024 DHL parcel bomb plot. I touched upon this briefly in the last one, the 2024 DHL parcel bomb plot. This was basically a package in a DHL plane that ignited, and the only reason that it avoided a catastrophe was because the plane was delayed. Doing some digging yesterday into that plot, the package in the plane ignited 13 minutes after it should have been in the air. So if that had have ignited and destroyed the plane mid-air, you were looking at a pretty big catastrophe. No good outcome, really. So, this DNA link. So, what has it got to do with? So, let me get to this report I've compiled. So, the cornerstone is an exact genetic DNA match found on the August the 4th drone detonator. When uploaded to European databases, it flagged a match in Vilnius in Lithuania. So, the DNA belongs to evidence files of an active trial in Lithuania. 5 suspects are currently being prosecuted for terrorism and sabotage relating to the July 20th, 2024 parcel bomb campaign. You might be thinking, well, 5 people are on trial. How can they get to Germany to do a drone strike? There's 3 intelligence theories for this. So we've got the cold storage device pipeline. Evidence from the Lithuanian prosecution indicates that the cell mass-produced and trafficked sabotage hardware before their arrests. The August 2026 drone or its trigger mechanism may have been assembled and placed in a hidden logistics cache in 2024, only to be retrieved recently by an active cell member. Number 2, the more worrying scenario is as a fugitive 6-man. The DNA profile matched genetic material collected at a 2024 Lithuanian safe house or transit package rather than the physical prisoners themselves. That could indicate an unidentified network member evaded the 2024 arrests and travelled to Germany to execute the 2026 drone attacks. The third scenario is it's neither of them, and it could belong to a specialised bomb maker in a safe state. The technician manufactured the trigger mechanisms for both the 2024 parcel incendiaries and the 2026 drone bombs, applying the identical DNA signature touch before the hardware was distributed to separate proxy cells across Europe. So the context now, going from an incendiary device in a plane to actively attempting to blow up an airport is a serious, catastrophic escalation in grey zone warfare. These acts were carried out by regional proxies, but Western and US intelligence agencies state overall the responsibility rests entirely with Russian military intelligence. Now you might be saying, hey, why blame Russia? It could be a false flag. We will get to that. The operation is basically targeted to disrupt the NATO strategic supply lines and the logistics operation supporting the Ukraine. Following this, the Bundestag is preparing an emergency vote to legally authorise the German military, or the Bundeswehr, to shoot down civilian drones violating restricted airspace over critical infrastructure, and the centralised federal drone defence hub is now being established in Magdeburg to coordinate anti-drone electronic and kinetic responses nationwide. So let's get into it. Who is responsible? So there's been no official statement as of yet, but following the forensic and intelligence investigations, the operation's being firmly attributed to state-sponsored Russian sabotage networks. Russia has categorically denied any involvement, even going so far to say it's just Western anti-Russian hysteria. But given that there's a DNA link to the 5 on trial in Vilnius, which was certainly attributed to Russia, they kind of really haven't got a leg to stand on. So we'll get into it a bit more deeper so we don't end up going into tinfoil hat territory. How is it attributed to Russia? So German and US intelligence agencies have built a robust case against Moscow based on hard physical evidence and distinct operational markers rather than just circumstantial deductions. As we mentioned, the DNA matching. The authorities in Germany recovered precise and viable DNA traces from the intercepted Leipzig drone components. Forensic databases match this genetic material directly to an incendiary parcel bomb plot that triggered a fire at a Leipzig DHL facility in July 24. A network meticulously traced back to Russian intelligence services using regional proxies. Again, the military grade materials. Again, this is semtex and hexagen. This is hardcore military grade explosives. It's not some hodgepodge hydrogen peroxide homemade crude device. Like I said, you're going to need serious connections to get hold of semtex. The acquisition and deployment of semtex and hexagen requires highly regulated state pipelines, excluding commercial hobbyists or low-level criminal syndicates. Then basically you're not going to get hold of it unless you're in the know and you're connected to a military. You've got the strategic target alignment. The drones targeted Leipzig. It's a primary logistics gateway for NATO, the operational European base for the Ukraine's Antonov fleet. It all matches up, basically. So there's an evaluation of alternative state hypotheses, which I've delved into as well. So speculation online, your rumblings online, going into tinfoil hat territory. One of the biggest hypotheses online is it's Ukraine trying to frame Russia to prompt a more aggressive attack on Russia, trying to get more nations involved in the war with Russia. And given this happened not long after Trump backtracked on giving Patriots it kind of added fuel to the fire. When you think about it, like if you go into tinfoil hat territory and you tell yourself something often enough, then you start to believe it. But when you look at it from a logical point of view, the Antonov fleet, these aren't replaceable planes. You know, if Ukraine destroyed just one of their Antonovs, that's a serious knock-on effect to their logistical supplies. This is what they use to get supplies from Europe and elsewhere into Ukraine. You know, this isn't like a C-130 where if you lose one, you can replace it. These are irreplaceable planes. So keeping hold of them to the Ukraine is absolutely invaluable. And destroying your own fleet to get supplies into your war-torn country, it's self-defeating. Yeah, if you get away with an act like that, you might get a harsher response against Russia, but you've done massive material losses to yourself, which is self-defeating. Then you've got the political risk. If Ukraine did this and it was uncovered that they were behind it trying to frame Russia, NATO support from the EU and everywhere else would instantly collapse, and Ukraine would basically be left fighting a war on their own, which they'd lose. Without the support of the EU, without the supplies from EU and elsewhere around the world, they wouldn't be able to keep the war going. It just wouldn't happen. And to be fair, it'd be an unmitigated disaster. So, yes, looking at it, you could say, oh, well, Ukraine could be involved, but when you get into the logic of it, you can kind of see why they wouldn't be involved. You've got hypothesis B, that it's not Ukraine, that it's a third-party state altogether. This third-party state, you could say, well, they're trying to escalate tensions between NATO and Russia. Again, looking at it logically, it's not viable. You know, say if it was the US, the UK or France that tried to frame Russia, there's no strategic incentive. It's a NATO hub. The US, the UK or France or anyone else in Europe, they're compromising their own logistics hub. It'd disrupt European commercial aviation, and it'd destroy the assets actively aiding Ukraine. So when you think about it, the NATO hub's used by all of Europe. It's the freight hub is used by all of Europe. You bring that to a halt, it's going to bring serious repercussions. You've then got neutral or different state actors. Sorry for that stutter. Advanced nations like China, they possess the technology, but there's no strategic rationale to initiate a deniable act of war against a European state, especially one that frames the closest geopolitical partner, Russia. And what else you've got to think of, any other nation that's trying to frame Russia, it risks triggering a direct NATO Article 5 or collective defensive crisis. If that bomb would have went off in Leipzig on the drone, that part of the airport would cease to exist. It would be seen as an attack. You've got a serious risk of NATO coming down on whoever did it. So, looking at it logically, the fingers point to Russia. You may think, well, they've denied it. One of the key indicators from Russia was a statement from Sergei Lavrov earlier this year. Much harsher asymmetric methods will be deployed to destroy everything that enables the West to fuel Kyiv's war machine. An attack on Leipzig, home to the Ukraine's Antonov fleet, NATO logistics hub, cargo freight hub of Europe, it all matches. Russian security services have also shifted from passive espionage to active kinetic operations. This includes orchestrating proxy arson campaigns, attempting to compromise naval shipyards in northern Germany, and directing unauthorized drone swarms over sensitive military bases and energy facilities. As you'll have probably seen in the news, there's been absolute numerous reports of unknown origin drones flying over airports. You've got the undersea infrastructure interdiction. NATO hybrid threat units have warned that Russia's specialised undersea research programme is actively mapping critical communication cables and energy pipelines in the Baltic and North Seas. Russian vessels, often operating disguised as civilian fishing trawlers, routinely shadow and probe these vulnerabilities to hold European connectivity hostage. Then you've got the societal polarisation and chaos. Through coordinated foreign information, manipulation and interference, cyber strikes on municipal utilities and deliberate GPS jamming in aviation corridors. The Kremlin aims to introduce a permanent state of public instability. The strategic goal, ultimately, is to erode the democratic public resolve, exploit internal political fractures and pressure European governments to withdraw support for Ukraine, basically holding the world hostage. So, in conclusion, the drone incident at Leipzig cannot be viewed as an isolated event, especially given you've got DNA evidence linking to well-known potential attacks at Leipzig or deceptive false flag operation. The synthesis of forensic DNA tracking, specialised ordnance signatures and a clear strategic motive firmly establishes Russian authorship. This operation underscores a profound shift in Russian doctrine, wherein Moscow actively executes high-risk, deniable kinetic strikes deep within NATO territory. As German Chancellor Friedrich Merz prepares an official state attribution, European security forces must realign their defensive postures to counter a continuous multi-domain hybrid front that deliberately operates just below the threshold of open military conflict. I think it's pretty damning. There's been no attribution statement yet from Merz, but you know, it's not going to take a genius to work out who he's going to pin the blame on. These attacks, it's easily deniable, and it is just below the threshold of open conflict and just below the threshold of NATO declaring an Article 5 on Russia. But like I said earlier, it's a serious escalation of the attacks. You've gone from a package in a plane to potentially blowing up an airport. That's a serious escalation given there's been 2 attacks on Leipzig. It wouldn't surprise me if there's another one, or targeting other airports around the world. Another airport that's a big hub, Heathrow, places like that. You know, these are proxies around Europe that Russia are employing to do the dirty work. And, you know, one false misstep and we're looking at Article 5, so the world really is on a knife edge at the minute. So yeah, quite a worrying time. The attribution statement coming imminently, but like I've said, it's not going to take a genius to work out who the blame's getting pointed at, and to be honest, with the digging I've done, it's pretty damning evidence, to be fair. So no doubt we'll be looking over this again at some point. No doubt there'll be others to look at in the near future, which, yeah, until then, goodbye.